So I'm going to hand over to the next chair, Professor Pauline Rose. Pauline is well known in this audience, but I will introduce you, Pauline, so that people do know you. Pauline is Professor of International Education at Cambridge, where she's also Director of the Rail Centre, the Research for Equitable Access and Learning in the Faculty of Education. She also co-directs and leads the Cambridge Global Challenges Interdisciplinary Research Centre. Prior to Cambridge, Pauline was Director of UNESCO's Education for All Global Monitoring Report. And throughout her career, she's collaborated on large research programs with teams in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, examining issues related to improving access to quality education for marginalized children. In 2022, she was recognized with an OBE for her services to girls' education internationally. Pauline is your next chair.
Ambassador. So for this session, we've got a slightly different format. It's a little bit more informal, so we're going to be having a conversation. So I'm just going to invite all of you to sit down. And I'm also not going to give long introductions because this discussion is to really hear from yourselves about what your careers have been after finishing your PhD. So we just heard such wonderful, detailed analysis of the work that some colleagues are doing during their PhDs, which has been so insightful and I think built on so well from the discussion earlier. And now we're going to be hearing about what happens life after PhDs. For those of you that are still in the throes of it, there is a life after PhDs that we'll be hearing about. There is a QR code up there to see more of the bios as well. I just also wanted to say that today is National Youth Day in South Africa, following 50 years following the Soweto youth uprising. So I think it's a fitting day for these discussions. But given that you're all, I think, 4 to 6 years out of your PhDs, I'm not sure whether you self-define as youth or not anymore, but you're not far out of it still, I'm sure. So we're going to hear from Dr. Shiona Achi, Dr. Maimouna Mohammed, and Dr. Sebastian Eugene Arthur. So maybe since you've got the mic, I'll start with you, and then if you pass on. So the question is, just in minutes to say what you've been doing after your PhD.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think it's been bumpy a little bit, right? Because I was trying to still figure out what I wanted to do after my PhD. Down here in Cambridge, I was doing viruses stuff, okay? And I was thinking, okay, if I'm doing viruses, my main aim after leaving Ghana 13 years ago, I was thinking that, you know what, I need to go back and make a change. And that is one thing Cambridge gives you, if you realize that. When you're here, you're thinking about leadership. Some way, somehow, you want to have an initiative. So I thought about going back home. And before I do that, I need to get my tools right. I need to get, myself established somehow. So I did some postdocs, first in the US, and then I moved to Netherlands, and then I went back to Ghana. When I got to Ghana, I started working on HIV because I realized that. So I was in a seminar. That's really funny. I was in a seminar when we were discussing HIV cure, and we were talking about HIV type B. So I had to look for HIV type B to understand why everyone is talking about HIV type B. And then I asked a question that, what about HIV-2 and the other recombinant that affects West Africans? The presenter just told me that, listen, that's your problem. And when I heard that, I thought, okay, I think she spoke frankly, and that is something we need to look into. So after PhD, one of the things that I think has been very striking is this response that I got. And I think I need to further my study in things that will support Africans, especially West Africa, where I come from. So I've been working on HIV-2 to understand what or why HIV-2 is less aggressive and see how we can use HIV-2 to combat HIV-1. If you want to understand this, I'll talk about that later. However, I also have another stream of research where I'm looking at respiratory infections. In our hospitals, we realize that most of the panels that we test when people come in with respiratory infection is limited. So the question is, what about those pathogens that we don't identify? Because when you come in and these 4 or 5 pathogens that we try to identify is negative, they allow you to go. People want to be cured of their symptoms, so they go in for medications, and therefore AMRs will come in. That's antimicrobial resistance. So my thing was that, okay, let me look for what is happening to those pathogens that are not, or those symptoms that we've not found what is causing them. So I got this Aborada grant to go into pathogen discovery. So I have the HIV work going, and I have the respiratory infection going. And the other things that I've been involved with, I talk about leadership. I've established the African Virologist Network, which is trying to put all virologists in Africa together so we can network and share resources. And I also do initiatives for children where I've created a platform, research scientists coming together, and then they engage school children with practical science activities. Because I realize that our education system has been so theoretical. That is not science. So I want to go into the aspect of practice. And that is where I bring the children to learn how fun science is through practical activities. That's been my story so far. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think just...
Oh, you have that.
Just building on earlier, I think so practical also in terms of how what the work that you've been doing.
I think that follows. Thank you. That follows very nicely into what I also have been doing. So like many of the older Cambridge Africa scholars, I finished my degree around the time when it was COVID. So immediately after submitting my thesis, I was confronted with the challenge of not having the traditional workforce and then the traditional employment opportunities available to me. So I kind of switched track, and I ended up engaging in a number of different consultancies as an independent researcher initially, and working remotely. But very, very soon afterwards, I've been able to travel. And I was based in Somalia with a lot of travel within the Horn of Africa, working on policy-oriented research, focusing on work that kind of was squarely kind of positioned within the development sector as well as the humanitarian sector. So as a social scientist, I kind of used my training and the work that I've done at Cambridge to support government institutions in Somalia, but outside of the Somalia on a regional level as well. I've worked with IGAD, which is the regional entity in the Horn of Africa and Eastern Africa, on a range of topics, using the research capabilities that I've acquired here. And using the evidence and the research that I was doing to make sure that we were designing programs that were participatory, that were useful to the communities that we were interested in, and of course that kind of ensured that we were impacting policy at the larger level. One of the really interesting projects that I've worked on with support from Harvard University was a research project that looked at climate knowledge among within Somali communities across the Horn of Africa. And we kind of really took a step back and wanted to not take basic concepts and terms and understandings for granted, and kind of really thought to interrogate how communities themselves defined the environment, ecosystem, climate, and what kind of insights that they were actually bringing to the debate, to the global debate and the regional debate. And for that, what was really, really interesting is that this was a global collaboration with my team in the Horn of Africa, working with universities in the US. And what we really insisted on doing is to really truly co-create and co-design the research, so that we're not just merely there to collect data as African researchers based in the region, but also kind of really defining the priorities, setting the agenda as was eloquently discussed earlier in the keynote, and ensuring that the questions that we were interested in were being reflected not only in the presentation of the research design, but also in the methodologies that we're thinking about using. I can go into this later in more detail, but yeah, I thought it was really useful for me to kind of put a lot of the discussions and then the thinking that I've done here as a student in Cambridge and put it into practice and to challenge some of the power inequities and the hierarchies that exist in research, especially research that involves African communities. So maybe I'll stop there and then maybe pick up some of the points later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, again, really practical ways in terms of how you've been using those research skills, not just for yourself, but also for
Okay, hi everyone. It's good to be back home. Coming from Oxford, I tell them this is the right place and the right. So, yeah, James is nodding. Yes. So 7 years ago, I had my bag packed. Haven't gotten the Cambridge Africa Scholarship with my small family then. My children, 3.5 and almost 2 at that time. And we got into Cambridge, and I wasn't quite sure of what the world held for me at that point because, it's Cambridge, the name and the pressure that comes with it. But I think I'll start by thanking all of those who contributed to my journey, because it's one thing to know where you're coming from and another to know where you're headed. Starting from the vet faculty. At that point, James Wood was the head of department, and we put a small poster on our door saying, "God bless our leader." So he's truly a leader, thanks to him. Mark Holmes, Lucy, Fiona, Andrea, who helped me with bioinformatics. I was nothing, I didn't know anything at that point. Yeah, and the Cambridge Africa family. For me, Cambridge Africa was truly a family, helped me go through my journey here in Cambridge. And Caroline Trotha, then Tabitha, Karina, and of blessed memory, Amit. Like Maimuna said, we were caught up with COVID at that point. So imagine, I remember when they told us COVID had hit, and my supervisor, Mark Holmes, called all of us to the lecture theater. And he said, unfortunately, we'll have to close up and everyone has to go. And I just stood there crying, like unsure of what the world held and everything. So, but thankfully we are at this stage now, and I can look back and say with so much confidence and thanks, gratitude, that the journey has been worth it. So 7 years ago, started off. It wasn't without ups and downs, obviously. There were times when I think I'll have to ask, I asked myself several times what I was doing in Cambridge. If you're a PhD student and you haven't gotten through that point then, But I did cry a lot. Caroline, thanks for opening your doors, because our office was just a few doors from hers. And when I was overwhelmed, and it felt overwhelming, I'll just go in and I'll just cry. Or I'll just go to Lucy's office or Barbara. So the fact that I had all those women there who had gone through this process, had seen it, was quite a lot of help for me. Yeah, I didn't just cry. I think there were good times then. The fact that I ended up with the Vice Chancellor's Award for my research, and also the Public Health England Award for my research as well, is a testament to how much the research went. So yeah, so before I was writing up my PhD then, my thesis at that point, and at the same time, when you're coming to the end of your PhD, you start worrying, what next? And I'd worked in the area of antimicrobial resistance from a One Health part. So antimicrobial resistance, basically looking at why antibiotics don't work for whatever reasons, So I was looking at fields and labs that were doing similar thing as I was at that point. And I saw this one lab, one group at the University of Oxford that was doing similar thing. And I remember going to my supervisor and saying, Mark, I want to apply for this. And I'm like, okay, let's give it a go and see what happens. And that was just months before I handed in my thesis. And I sent in that application, was invited for the interview, and that set the stage for another story. So the rest, they say, is history. So immediately after my viva, I started working with the University of Oxford as a postdoctoral researcher. I joined the INEOS Oxford Institute for Antimicrobial Research. And our work cuts across looking at the burden of antimicrobial resistance in developing societies, and specifically looking at neonatal sepsis in babies, but also looking at bloodstream infections in adults. The study is more of a multi-country study. We keep calling global, but it's not global. Multi-country study, so covering countries in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria. So going there with all that Cambridge had taught me, I helped set up the study. At that point, it was a new institute, nothing really happening. There were a few of us with the PI team, Walsh. Helped set up the institute, and I kind of led the conceptualization, the delivery, the budgeting, everything for the Nigeria aspect of the study. So, and that was where I worked with that institute for the next 4 years. And after then, I was then made the Nigeria scientific lead for the IOI body of AMR studies. Besides the work on neonatal sepsis and bloodstream infections, I'm first a vet, but I switched a lot to microbiology, bringing in some genomic tools and epi tools. So I co-led another study that looked at the role that arthropods, flies, mosquitoes, all of that had to do with antimicrobial resistance. And working across, so I tried to set up a collaboration that involved 18 countries, about 33 different sites. In Nigeria, I had 8 hospitals across the region, different parts of Nigeria that I was working with, and that has really helped to set the stage in terms of collaboration and network. So down to sometime in 2022, 2023, I saw another opportunity while still working with Oxford. I thought this looks great. And so I'm very pro-African. So any research that has to take me back home, I'm number one on it. So the fact that all of my research was Nigeria-based, and then this one was with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. They had advertised for an assistant professor, and the role was linked with the UK Public Health Rapid Support Team. So the UK Public Health Rapid Support Team helps with epidemic preparedness, response, helping countries to prepare and respond when there are epidemics. And they had this really interesting study on Mpox, looking at it from the clinical side, looking at it from the community and one transmission angle, looking at it from the social science aspect. And I thought, yeah, this looks interesting. Again, it had to do with Nigeria, which was what kind of led me to applying. And I first started as a consultant with them for a year, about a year, and then switched into the role as assistant professor. So my current role is as an assistant professor at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, while also spending a few days with the University of Oxford. So I kind of merged the two of them. But beyond research, I built great friendship with the Cambridge Africa team, and I'm sure you'd have seen David Izwogu. We still work very closely together on on one of the NGOs we set up, helping to mentor young people in Africa as well. So I think other questions will come later, and other collaboration, but thanks, yeah.
Thank you. I know you've all done so many amazing things that trying to squeeze it into 5 minutes is impossible. And as you were mentioning, you'll be seeing behind us on the screen here, there's a carousel, because we just have 3 wonderful examples of Cambridge Africa PhD graduates, but there are many, many more. And I think, Karina, when you put out the call for people to share their stories, many flooded in, so there's far more to share, and wanted to make sure that you had some sort of sight of other ones that are also there. I think we've just got about 10 minutes, so please put up your hand. While you're putting up your hand, okay, we already have a hand from Carol, so let's start with the audience, and I might ask you a question.
Thank you so much. It's so great to meet you all again, Chioma and Sebastian. I remember you. Lovely to see how you're progressing and doing great. So I just wanted to know what you have to say about this. Cambridge is a great place. It attracts wonderful talent. But one thing that I have seen, also having studied here, is I think once you get to the end of your program, whether that be a master's or PhD as an African scholar, whether you've come from another country, the question you get is, when are you going back home to fix Africa? I think Americans don't get that question, Europeans don't get it, nobody else does but Africa. I wonder what you think about the transition and how Cambridge, because we've heard a lot about Africa. Africa is not a bad continent, it's a beautiful continent that has a lot. And I think it's not all doom and gloom as we hear. There's so many challenges, and here also in the UK there are. However, there are so many talents and so much good coming out of Africa despite the challenges. But you having gone there and also still currently involved with the continent, how do you think Cambridge can support transitions, particularly when African scholars have been attracted? Now we have a MasterCard scholarship with lots of students who get to the end, and I think there's a little confusion on what else they can do and where they want to go. How can Cambridge support the transition, even to a postdoctoral level? Because when we come to the postdoctoral level in Cambridge, how many African scholars do you have there? And not that people don't want to stay, and not that it can attract more, but why is there not a transition, and how can that be better supported? What do you have to say about that? Have you gone home to fix Africa, or do you think that you needed more support, and how can Cambridge do better there?
That would be a huge burden on each of your shoulders, I think, and really well put question. Thank you, Carol. I think we just have a few minutes left, so I don't know, Karina, do we have time for one more comment? Yeah, one more question. Is there anyone else? Just because we've asked some wonderful questions, but let's just see. Otherwise, we'll go. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for your sharing your work and what you're doing. My question is about how you have managed to, particularly for you spoke about how you had your kids when you came and you did your PhD. So my question is more focused on how you have managed to balance your family life and advancing your career. I ask this as a young African woman who would also want to have her own family but also continue growing in terms of my career path. So it is quite inspiring when I do see people that are, managing to balance both. So interested to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Maybe you can all answer that in terms of your own work life. I'm sure everybody has experiences, so should we go in reverse order?
Yeah, thanks, Carol. I remember that question because it was a heated debate while we're here as students at that point. Go back and fix Africa. I think from Professor John's talk this morning, we can't all be in Africa. And a lot of us, so for instance, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. I know for sure I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing if I was in Africa, because you have to think about the resources. I completed my master's in the UK here, and I went back, and then I looked at, of course, very topical now, Bundibugo Ebola virus. We're trying to develop a neutralization assay for it, and learned all of the skills during my MSc research, and I was so keen. I was so keen that I didn't wait for my graduation. I ran back home because I wanted to transfer what I'd learned back home. And I got there was nothing for me to start on. I couldn't use the skills I'd acquired because the resources, the facilities were not there. And that was quite frustrating for me, And until I got the opportunity to come back, and I said, you know what, you can always give back from wherever you are. And that's why, like I said, I'm really keen to give back from wherever I am. If I'm writing a grant, if I'm collaborating, I'm looking for African researchers, I'm looking for institutes who are doing great work. And that way we can continue to give back and build the next generation of leaders, mentoring young African scholars who want to come out to study and all of that. I'm looking at... Yeah. So, and again, while as a student, I did apply for the Cambridge Africa. No, I didn't apply. I think that was part of the transition, because you asked about transition while we're finishing our PhD, where people had to say what they wanted to do next. And I got this equipment grant where I went to set up a lab with a university in Sokoto, Nigeria then. And since then, we've kept that collaboration going. How I've been able to manage family and PhD, I must admit, I'm not doing this alone. I haven't done this alone. I'm blessed to have a supportive husband and partner who's also been there and picking up when I'm not there. So together, we've been able to do it together. But I must tell you, it's not easy. I had great support from Cambridge Africa. Cambridge Africa, again, family, my family forever. So I had that great support from Cambridge, Africa. And then going on and applying for research, sometimes for grants, there are places where you could ask for childcare, if your parenting responsibilities or caring responsibilities don't allow you to do the research you want to do, you can also factor that into grants. So mindful of time, sorry.
So maybe picking up on what you were just mentioning about balancing family and work. I'm not sure where we can balance it totally. I mean, I think, so in my experience, I've had my daughter here in Cambridge. She was born here at the start of my PhD, and like you said, I was really, really blessed to have a really great support network. My partner was there. My mom at the time was here, and it allowed me to really do my research and continue my work, my coursework in a way that I was successful and continued on. And of course, my supervisor and my academic advisor, so credit goes to them as well. If I can shift a little bit and address the question about this sense of responsibility of doing something, of fixing Africa, in quotes, as you put it, I think I've learned that there is a lot to say about having the humility to know that you go back and you contribute and you do what you can, but you don't have the responsibility to fix the country or society just because you've had the privilege of going to Cambridge and having your degree, your fancy degree. I think I've learned that, and I have implemented it, and I benefit so much from learning from the people I work with, from the communities I do research with, and from the colleagues that I have had the great opportunity of working with. Just having the sense of humility, the respect, the emphasizing reciprocity, and not just engaging and reinforcing some extractive practices that exist in research, especially in policy-oriented research. That's a main takeaway from me.
Yeah.
A minute to say how you're going to fix.
I was actually going to say that I have nothing to say after everything. But let me quickly mention that to go back and fix the continent is big, right? It's a huge thing. But you came here with a question. And I'm sure your question, when you're writing your proposal or whatever, you mentioned in there that you want to go back and fix something. Why don't you go back to the proposal, look at it, and then see what you can do about it now that you have the tools and the training? Now, you talked about transition help from Cambridge, right? I think there is transition help. If you talk to the leaders or the board, you have the opportunity of an Alberta grant. If you have a very good question to answer, I'm very positive that once you've gone through their system, they are willing to support, and it comes with a mentor. So to me, there is something. But the key question is, do many people want to go back? Because when I finished my PhD, I moved to the US. I didn't go to Africa, right? And you can't I don't think you can really do Alberta research when you are in the US or Netherlands, where I've been, or France, where I've been. It can't happen. You have to go back home. So to me, I think the grant is there. It all depends on you, the students, who had gone through and now become a graduate. Are you going back to do what you said you're going to do? If we answer that question, I think in our own small way, we can fix our countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think such inspiring stories and experience that you've explained to us. I love the way you explained your work in such practical terms, because not all of us are experts in the area you're in, and I think it was so tangible and understandable, and how your experience goes far beyond you as the individual. So humility, yes, but also be proud of what you've achieved at the same time, I think. And I think really great points about, yes, there are things that can be done, and think about what it is that can be done, and the support network that you all have. Please do seek out, I know there's a number of people here in the audience who are just finishing their masters or in the midst of their PhDs. Do seek out the colleagues here for further discussions over lunch. I'm sure you'll be happy to share that experience further. I think you've got such a rich experience to discuss more. But sorry that we have to come to an end now. We have a very tight schedule to start on time at 1:30 when the Vice-Chancellor is going to be announcing the Amit Basin Award, which we're all very much looking forward to. So thank you all, and wonderful to see you all again and to